Oh, and we could ask who's going to be in Yokohama.
I plan to.
I also plan to, but I cannot really commit to it yet.
Yeah, I may go. It's uncertain so far.
So on top of the hour now, and say 4 minutes to go. Yeah, I was noting that not counting the cancelled interim meetings, this year we've had 14 interim meetings with this one. That's a lot.
Yes, and some of them were sweet and short.
Yeah. To be sure, Francesca, can you hear us?
Well, she has switched on the microphone, but we can't hear.
Yeah, Francesca, if you're talking, we can't hear you. On mobile, okay.
Okay, I think you can start.
Let's do that. And hi, everyone. Welcome to the interim meeting of the core working group. It should be the last for this year. This is Marco. My co-chairs are Jaime Jimenez and Karsten Bormann. And as a reminder, this is an official meeting, so the note 12 applies. So please note well. It's not just about IPR, it's also about our code of conduct. So be nice and professional with each other. And that said, we have two main items in the agenda for today. I'll try to take notes myself. Any help is appreciated on our notes. The two items are the status and plan next steps for the core SID document from the CoreConf cluster. And we were discussing before already that a design team meeting is planned somewhere in the next few weeks. We'll have a doodle about that. And then we agreed already at the previous interim meeting to wrap up on the resolution of the errata for the core documents, and we got some input today. I can see from Klaus on the notes themselves, and I also saw a mail from ESCO on the list. No other topics were added, so I think we'll stick to those. Let's see how much time they take. And we can start with CORE-SID then, Karsten.
Great. Yeah, I actually have a slight addition to the agenda. Maybe we can talk about the other CoreConf document, COMAI, that we have to get fixed soon. Maybe we can have a couple of minutes each about the target attributes and the corrections and clarifications document.
So CoreCLAR probably after the errata, I suppose.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Or maybe before the errata, so we can, when we do the errata, maybe think about what...
You know better, depending on what you want to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but of course, these two items interact closely. So if nobody has a problem with that, then let me go into the CoreConf part. So CoreConf is 4 documents. One is an RFC. One is in ISG and has had a discuss for 1.5 years now. One has passed working group last call, but there are some ongoing discussions, and we want to make sure that when we ship it, it actually is up to date with the changes that the first 2 documents took in the ISG process. And finally, we have the Yang library document that has a bit of a problem in that the people who really need this haven't recently contributed much to it. So yeah, but that will not be the subject today. Let's first finish the first 3. So that's the context. On CORE-SID, we have a discuss, which was from July, but not July this year, but July last year. So this was on version -16 of the document. The remaining main issue in that discuss was that we wanted to document the objectives of the SID management better, so the reader doesn't have to guess this from the mechanism we describe, but actually gets the objectives in a clear statement. -19, which is from July this year, addressed this, at least I think. This is pull request 146. I was going to merge this right after we got feedback on that, which hasn't happened yet. And I have not been very successful in talking to Rob about that. I met him at IETF 115, but we actually didn't manage to set up an actual meeting about that. So this is one item where we are essentially waiting for Rob's input, but that of course doesn't mean that we cannot have input from the working group on this as well. So please read that section, that new section in -19. And the other thing that came up is that in the workflow, when you have a SID file that is already merged from a stable and an unstable input. So let's say you have a published RFC, you have a pretty stable draft. It's not yet stable in the SID file sense, but it's nearing completion. And then you start adding two or three more further items. You have the situation where you have a SID file that comes from the stable source of the old published RFC, the unstable source of the current internet draft, and you want to use that as input to a further SID generation from the current Yang module. And that's not something that's currently supported by pYang. And so far the workflow is based on the idea that a whole file is either stable and unstable. And that obviously doesn't work in the specific use case that I just mentioned. So we came up with a stable field, which can be true or false, defaults to true, which is a bit weird, but yeah, that happens when you introduce a new field late in the process. Then the old meaning has to be the default. Yeah, before we really can push this, we probably need to find someone who can support this in PA. So that's another open flank we have right now. It would, I mean, this is trivial enough that we are probably going to get this right without implementation support, but it's certainly better to have it supported before we actually complete this document. So the whole set of changes is probably large enough that we will want to do a second working last call on this. That's not for me to decide, that's for the other chairs to decide. But that would be my guess what the chairs will decide. So we will go through the whole process once more. But I think that's a reasonable thing to do if we think this can be done reasonably fast. So just one more slide here with the addition to the SID file. So this is a new leaf, and which you put into the description of a specific SID, or the data for a specific SID. And this is an enumeration that is either stable or unstable with value 0 and value 1, and the default is stable. So that's the status of SID. We just immediately before the meeting said we wanted to have a design team meeting to discuss any further questions, in particular about workflows. I mean, this requirement for a stable field that came up when we were discussing workflows, and we lost Francesca, apparently. Yeah, media streams don't always work with Meet Echo. I don't know why. Anyway, so this is what we have done or nearly done, and we probably need another editorial round after the latest changes. So, for instance, we swapped out Yang data and put in SX structure instead, but there are still some remnants of Yang data and references to the netconf draft that are no longer needed at this point. And there's the usual checking you need when you work on a Yang module. You have to look at potential changes that need to be made, and there needs to be a new date in there, and we have to check whether the author set is still right. And one other thing that we probably want to do is do another review against the COMA requirements. So this is the plan. I think that oops, that is COMA. I think that what we need to do is pretty clear. We're waiting for this one elephant, which is the discuss, and it would be good to clear this discuss before we go into another round of last calling. Any comments on that?
You mentioned a possible new working group last call. I wonder if this requires also a new IETF last call. I don't know.
Yes. So
Okay.
we would really go 2 steps back.
Right.
But again, that's for the working group chairs to decide whether the changes are heavy enough that we should do that. So my reading is we do have some changes here, and that's the that might be the appropriate thing to do.
Okay. And there should be one revision more, hopefully. The next revision should be the one.
Yes.
Okay. Francesca is asking in the chat if we need her to get to Rob.
Apparently. So I don't have luck talking to him. So I think he hasn't looked at Zulip for 2 weeks, and he apparently didn't get my email. So yeah, little nudge would be nice. Yeah, I think we need a new ISG review. I agree with that.
So it's just a new full cycle.
Yeah, it's tedious. I mean, we can try to just slip by all this. If Rob agrees with that, then I would be willing to confide in doing something like that. When did I send him the email? Check that. Well, the last one was yesterday at 2 p.m. I think I sent a few before. I just don't find them, of course, in my mail chaos. Yeah, but the last one was yesterday. And I mean, this mail wasn't a surprise for him because we had discussed this at IETF-115. So okay, any more questions about this?
So if it goes smoothly with the design team meeting and everything, we may have the new revision in January.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the telechat is on the 15th, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, there is an informal one tomorrow. Okay, great. Okay, so I think with that, we can have a quick look at COMI. The COMI document is up next, and we were waiting for Yang Sibor to get done before we did the finishing touches on COMI. And there's some editorial stuff to be done again. And there is one technical issue, which is the K query parameter. So normally when you do COMI, you would use, when you do COMI with COAP, you would use the fetch method, so you can specify exactly what the parameters for the operation are. But there is also a get version of that. And that, of course, requires representing all kinds of information in the URI. And now, why doesn't this advance the slide? It does. So, of course, there are a number of Yang data types. And what COMI currently does is it defines its own representation of these Yang data types, which sometimes use the Yang Sibor representation, but sometimes also are different. And we found that this was sometimes, well, first of all, it's just complexity, because you suddenly have to have two different representations of the same information. But it's also surprising, for instance, that when you go from an unsigned integer to a signed integer, the representation changes completely. So the unsigned representation is the decimal number. The signed representation is a base 64 encoded, CBOR encoded number. So it looks completely different. Yeah, there are even some small editorial problems here. Decimal 64, the entry has to be written differently, but that can be easily fixed. The problem really is that this is all different. And in most constrained applications, you are not running the gamut of these 11 different classes of Yang data types. So this is just a lot of effort you have to do for supporting get, which you probably don't really want to support anyway, because you really want to work with fetch. So what we came up with when we discussed this at the hackathon, the IETF-115 hackathon, is to always use URL safe base 64 of the CBOR, of the encoded CBOR representation of the key. This has the advantage that it's uniform. This has the disadvantage that there are certain cases when this is longer. There are also cases when this is shorter, so a decimal representation of a larger number will always be longer than a base 64 representation of the same number. Yeah, this trades complexity against yeah, maybe the occasional additional byte being used in a query parameter. But again, if you really care about this, use fetch and don't use get. So the solution is pretty clear. But if there is a good reason to use get, you might be spending a byte or two more. The one place that is probably most frequent for many applications is the string case. And here, as you can see from the table, the text string case, the old comma representation is particularly efficient because you can just put the actual value there, at least if that doesn't contain an ampersand sign. If it contains an ampersand sign, then you have to do something about that. Well, that's in the UI. In the actual co-app, you don't have to cope with that. So that's maybe one thing that we yeah, Kuhn has a comment that describes this in more detail. Let's do the exact wording for the thing offline. I'm just trying to give a high-level view here. So for the frequent case that we have a string, we might want to make a special case out of that. I'm not sure that it's worth doing that, but it's at least if people really care about the text string case, we could do that. So we would reduce the 11 cases to 2 instead of 1, which I think is still okay. So I don't know if anybody in this meeting has an opinion on that, but that's definitely something we would need to discuss. But of course, the bigger question is, do we want to make a relatively large change here to simplify things? I'm always a big fan of simplifying things while I still can simplify it. But of course, if there are large existing installations that use this mechanism, that would be a little bit unfortunate. So maybe we want to do something on the mailing list that alerts people to that change being discussed. So cool. I don't know if you want to say something about your implementer's point of view about this.
Okay, this works now. You can hear me, I assume. Yeah. So from yeah, I have a working implementation implementing both get and fetch as described, like the get as described with the different encodings currently in the draft. I have to admit that the different encoding is mostly complexity, but in terms of code size, the different encodings doesn't really matter that much. Digging my own grave here in terms of the proposed change. I would say it's mostly like getting this consistent. There was also the edge case. Karsten pointed out at the hackathon that if there is, like this is, I think, currently a comma separated string with different k params. If there's a comma in your string key, then the whole encoding breaks. But yeah, not much more to add here, I think. I would say going with the URL safe, base64 encoded CBOR of everything is the safe way to go. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we at least have in-room consensus for moving forward in that direction, and the actual change still has to be made into a pull request, and when we have that pull request, we can discuss it on the list. Great. So let me just quickly talk about two documents. One is the target attributes, which we adopted as a working group document, and I don't think there's really that much to be done there, but we probably want to do a -01 where we update the prefill table, so what is already registered in the document and not by later designated expert action and IANA action. So that should be obvious what we want to do there. And one issue came up, would it be useful to limit the length of the names of these target attributes? So Thomas Fossati asked whether we maybe want to go with a limit like 16 or 32. That can sometimes make it easier for implementations to handle these things. So unless there is a knee-jerk reaction here, we can discuss this in the GitHub issue. Okay, and once we have -01, I think we want to go for working group last call.
Yes, sounds good. I think having a limit on the length is a good idea overall. Not sure about the exact number, but we should have something.
Okay, so we can all take out our dice and find a number. 42 might be a good limit.
Indeed.
Okay, and last slide. In 2018, I think I wrote this corrections and clarifications draft, or actually a pretty much empty hull for that. I think we have repeatedly found out we want to revive that. The GitHub repository is there. So if you want to look at recent activity where recent is defined in the last 4 years, you can look there. So one direction that I think we understand is that we want to have more text about errata, because errata reports are always a little bit TERS, and it's also hard to add additional explanation to errata reports that have been accepted. So it may be good to have something, and pull request 26 is an example for such a errata report being explained in a little bit more detail. And we probably would want to do this with all the errata that are out there, so people can look this up in more detail. So this would be on the explanation side. Then we have two other sources of wisdom that we could make use of. One is the COAB FAQ, frequently asked questions. And there is a link in the chat that contains good stuff that currently is just numbered questions, but we probably could sort it into clarifications and explanations and so on. And then, of course, there is a pretty decent LWIG COAB document that just isn't complete. So we never decided to finish it, but what's there is already pretty good. And we probably should think about what to do with this document. Do we just reference the expired internet draft from corrections and clarifications, or do we actually pull in text from there? So that's what we need to decide. I think I'm going to make a pull request for that shows how pulling in the FAQ might look like. Of course, the FAQ is also useful because it is a wiki document, and people can just contribute to that with low effort. So we have to balance here between wanting to have something like a consensus working group view of the answer to the question, which is really more going into the CORE document, and just having a random wiki somewhere on the web that is like Stack Overflow, useful, but may not be right. And that brings up the question, what is actually going to be the intended status of this document? Is this a standards Wi-Fi IETF org? Yeah, wiki. We have a IETF wiki. Yes, so we could use that. It has this problem that it essentially gives the keys to the kingdom to the working group chairs, but the chairs may not be the ones who actually want to run this process. So I'm not necessarily very convinced that this is exactly the way we want to run this. So random GitHub, well, that's at least in the core working group organization, may be a better way to run this than using wiki IETF.org. Okay, but that's the spectrum on which we will need to balance things. So I wanted to bring up my last point here, which is what is the intended status of this document? Of course, if we ever want to adopt this as a working group document, then we should at least at that point make up our mind about that. We can, of course, always change that. So there are likely to be some standards track elements in that document, so the actual corrections, which would need to be based on a strong consensus, and there will be informational parts in the document. So things like, how do I do eggs? And the answer may be, don't do eggs. And this is certainly not standards track content, but informational content. And it might be a little bit opinionated, so it might not have the same strong consensus that the corrections we are making have. And yeah, from a process point of view, it's nice to not have to decide whether we have a standards track or an informational resolution at the time where we work on this item. But yeah, from document point of view, this would need to be clearly separated. Right now there is a section 2 and a section 3 in the draft that have a similar difference between them. And yeah, maybe we can put those into an appendix, the informational parts into an appendix to make it more obvious that this is not the standards track part of the document. So you hear me leaning towards putting both into the same document, but I don't have a strong opinion on that, and it would be good to hear from others.
So corrections would be actual fixes that update the protocol in a sense, right, and affect implementations. Yeah, that sounds like it deserves standards track, I think, at least for that part.
Yeah, so if you look in this pull request 26, there is a sentence that is missing there, which is the CT target attribute cannot be repeated, cannot be used multiple times. And the correction is that we supply this missing sentence, which the errata report already does. But of course, it's much better to have a true update, document update in the form of a corrections document for that, because the explanation can be more detailed.
Yeah, the informational part would be the clarifications of core-clar.
Yeah, I'm not so sure whether these are clarifications, which really are essentially editorial corrections, where the text isn't clear enough. While it is clear what the working group was intending there, it may not be clear to a reader that has not been part of the discussion. So that's different from a correction where we actually have something that is missing or even misstated in the document. So one correction, for instance, would be the columns of the content format registration, which
and the payload as part of the cache key.
Yes.
For example, yeah, that sounds really standards track related.
Yeah. Well, for me that is a clarification, but
yeah, but basically, if there are already points beyond explanations and pure informational, that moves to standards track overall, I think, as document status. And of course, you need strong consensus, but you are entering that territory.
Okay, so that's all I had.
And by the way, in having the informational content into the appendix, perhaps some of it, the most opinionated, let's say, if it's pretty smooth and uncontroversial, why not keep it in the document body if it's an important informational explanation to highlight?
Yeah, so for instance, we had a errata report, which needs to be rejected, where somebody complained that we are not describing how the message number space is supposed to be managed.
Mm-hmm.
And that is certainly something that the document leaves open on purpose. And where we have additional sources like the LB-COEP discussion that can be used in coming up with a good implementation strategy. So this would be an explanation and even a recommendation, a weak recommendation of certain strategies, or maybe an exposition of strategies that have not run into opposition.
Mm.
Yeah, I think there's a wide spectrum there.
Okay. An actual draft was never posted, right? It has always been a GitHub repo, or am I wrong?
No, there's actually a draft moment from 2018.
Okay.
But we probably want to do a -01 before we adopt this.
Of course.
And yeah, in the next agenda item, we will produce additional material for that.
So it's mostly about how to take things from the sources of wisdom that you mentioned, what to pick that is really relevant to pick, and how to transfer it really.
Yeah, and maybe we even want to write something in the document. What were our guidelines for doing this document?
Yeah, content selection to be included. Basically, I can imagine as next step.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Which kind of smoothly brings us to the errata resolution. And yeah, the core CLAR document would be a way to address the errata that are decided to be held for an update, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think you have slides for that, but it boils down again to the same mail that Francesca sent a few weeks ago. And I may soon share my screen again. Let's see. Okay, now you should see the list. And yeah, and we got some input today that you can find on the notes, and then a mail from ESCO I noticed. So there were in particular some input from Klaus. I think. Right. So we can go through them one by one. Looks like 4895 is fine for Klaus here, and in general there were no objections. There was the clarification from ESCO, I think. Yeah, to be held for document update. Then there were the two errata that were filed basically together by Klaus about mentioning explicitly the fragment component of the URI for the co-op and co-op-S scheme separately. So that was initially proposed as verified, and Klaus is noting that there used to be an errata for HTTP that does exactly the opposite. And in fact, if you check RFC 9110, which is updating that RFC that errata referred to, yeah, you don't have the fragment component mentioned. And the mail from ESCO today will further build on that, if I understand ESCO correctly, saying that they'll introduce confusion, basically. Introducing the fragment component will introduce confusion. In the light of this comment that, yeah, it makes sense to me, would be the best thing to do, basically, rejecting the errata that, by the way, Klaus himself proposed.
Yes.
But
yeah, I remember what happened. So Klaus found this. There is a problem there, and Klaus found it and wrote it up. But then we learned that HTTP actually had the same problem, and people fixed it in the other direction. And we probably shouldn't be doing something that is different from HTTP for. Yeah, you may not like the way this has been solved in HTTP, but it's kind of the received interpretation of URIs. So yeah.
So last call is on Francesca, I guess, but this is pointing to rejecting the errata, actually. 4946 and 4947. Probably core-clar can, I don't know, add a sentence that further clarifies why things are the way they are.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, so really this should be hold for document update because it's one of those places where we have to have more discussion to actually correctly address the report. And this should point to the document where we do this.
Yeah, which should be core-clar again.
Yes.
Okay. Well, good. Okay, then 4948 looks good to Klaus too. He has a note though that this is a substantial protocol change. Yes, that's what we were discussing before, and I believe it can be one point that warrants the standard struct status to core-clar, for example. But at least for the sake of the
yeah. So again, it's a clarification for me because that was always what we intended. But yeah, the text doesn't currently reveal that this is what we intended.
So it's a bit borderline about hold for doc update and verified, but probably verified is better so that this is out and clarified as soon as possible through the errata process. I don't know if this is an orthodox. Maybe it deserves to be taken as verified anyway, even though it will come back in core-clar.
Yeah, that's 100% okay.
Okay. So we take this as verified. I think 4949 was fine. 4954, this was about oh right, the columns of the registries, and yeah, Klaus on again on his own raised the errata as a comment, and yeah, I think this latest comment is correct if you want to express both the media type and the parameter in the content type column.
So it took us up to RFC 9193 to agree on the actual terminology we want to use here. And now we have written it down and we should use it. So Klaus is right.
I mean, the alternative would be having a media type column and the parameter column to be added, but this is better.
Yeah, this is really complicated because most registrations will not have a parameter. So this, yeah.
But basically, what's the outcome about handling this errata? Should it be rejected? Because it needs to be edited at the very least, right? To be verified. I mean, right now it's not saying what they should say in the first place. So it can be rejected, and we know that this will be fixed in core-clar, for example, or edited and then hold for doc update. Right?
Yeah, I don't know whether the errata process allows the reviewer, the verifier, to actually change the proposed solution, which would be a very obvious thing to do in most cases, but I don't know if the process does this. So maybe Francesca knows.
Yeah, see, Francesca is writing in the chat also.
She believes she can change that.
Yeah, then we should just change media type into content type. And
so this would be about editing the current errata and then take it as all for document update.
no, then it's verified.
No, already. Okay. Okay, that was also pending a pending point, by the way, but
Just
okay,
for the
then
notes,
just
which exact errata was this? Which number was this?
sorry, 4954.
Okay, then
Yeah,
okay, cool.
that one. Okay, so to be edited and then verified.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's important because it would allow IANA to actually fix the actual registry. So if we do hold for document update, then we have to wait for some document to finally make that change.
And then we should check with the help of the fixed registry any other document that did any registration considering the current wrong columns, and probably file a errata for those documents, or leave core-clar update those documents too.
I would update it in core-clar. There's
Yeah?
no
That's another possibility, but yeah, whatever creates less overhead
yeah.
and mess and work for the AD, for example. Okay, but one step at a time. So 5078 should be good. And then we should double check again instead 5254. So that's about 6690, actually, link format. And it was a proposal that I don't remember in detail, but it was about updating the format and the semantics of links to rule out a variant that was very error prone with strange URIs. Let's check the errata. Yeah. So the proposal originally was to reject it because it was changing link format, basically as it was intended. And that made sense to me. Today, though, we got a comment from Klaus, number 4. So I can agree, it is a concern, and the fix looks like it works, but isn't it actually changing the intent and agreed intent of 6690? This looks something to be fixed with an update to 6690, right?
Yeah, so we would invalidate all those cases where people have used an HTTP URI that is innocuous from the point of view of the link format syntax without quotes. And I think that would be a change. I think it would be a change for the better, but it would still be a change.
So in case it is something for document updated link format, but yeah, it feels like it goes beyond the scope of an errata, as I understand the errata process to work.
So that's the real problem is much deeper. The real problem is that the ABNF tells you the syntax of the interchange thing, but it doesn't tell you what meaning you actually derive from that. And it's the meaning that you derive from that then again requires a syntax. And that's what 8288 did. So the syntax they have is the ABNF productions they have are mostly not about the interchanged data, but about what the decoding process of the interchange data derives. And then you have ABNF that tells you what that can be. And we would kind of move away from this again by saying even the simplest HTTP URIs need to be quoted. This would move quoting again from something you just do because the syntax otherwise wouldn't work lexically to something that has weird semantic consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm against that direction.
Yeah, and bottom line, the outcome in 6690 was not in that direction anyway, right? It'd be really a change of direction, not a.
Well,
not
6690 is kind of inconsistent because it does require quoted syntax for a couple cases, which is not the right thing to do, but it's exactly this dual layer ABNF issue that we have in so many other places. So let me try to find where that is. Yeah, so for instance, the anchor always has to use quotes. And I think that's a bug, but it's not a bug that we probably want to fix at this point again.
Okay, so Francesca's the final call, but looks like we should keep rejecting it. As originally suggested. Sorry if I move backwards to a previous errata we checked before, the pair 4946 and 4947. There seems to be a contradiction in the statements in line 119 and 120. So I think the conclusion was to do a rejection and then let CoreClar do the work, but the note on Carsten says help for document update instead. Which is which?
Then I remove that if that's not an accurate statement.
So there will be a document update from CoreClar, but formally to process the errata, I think it was simpler to reject the errata. And
yeah, I agree.
Clarifications will come in CoreClar. Anyway, okay, good. So just double checking, all is clear for the controversial ones. So this one, edited and verified, and this one, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, we have one more to check, 5284. And the original proposal was verified. I think it was about the meaning and the scope of a co-op token given a pair of endpoints per request. And it was from MED proposing to explicitly add per request to the sentence. If I understand Klaus' comment correctly, is arguing that you don't need to restate that. The token is already per request given a pair of endpoints, so it's a not useful repetition.
I have a much deeper problem here in that saying something is unique doesn't mean anything until you actually say with which domain it is unique.
So you think the source destination endpoint pair is not a sufficiently well-defined domain?
Well, I have a problem with the term unique, and it doesn't get better by adding per request to that sentence. So I probably can guess what the sentence is trying to say without that addition, but with that addition, I'm completely.
Let me display the sentences, by the way. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, unique was used already in the original text anyway.
Yes. But again, I don't have I can find out what is meant here. But if you add per request, I no longer can do that.
Francesca is wondering for Klaus mail. There's no mail from Klaus Francesca. This table just appeared a few hours ago in the notes. And well, it's pretty comprehensive. I think it was good material, but no mail. Right. But Carsten, if I understand your point, anyway, the addition from MED is not really clarifying anything.
Yeah, it's muddying the water for me.
Oh, okay. Okay. So putting together Klaus input and yours, that makes it a rejected.
Yeah.
Basically, and if we want to clarify that sentence anyway, that can also happen in CORE later on.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, then 5284, if it's fine to Francesca, can be rejected too. Okay, Francesca left anyway. I'll try to build up in these minutes a summary for Francesca to consider as final input from the group. But those where Cloud said okay are confirmed basically. And then in these detailed notes, we took decision on the other ones. Is there any other thought about those that we haven't checked? Meaning 4895, 4949, and 5429. Looks like no. Then we have a plan. I believe Francesca will do yet another sanity check before proceeding. And then this is also one more source of wisdom for CORE.
Yeah, so 4949 is very, very obviously true. So
4949, what was that?
That was about sending an error response to a response. And that is not possible.
Of course. Right. Cool. Okay, if there are no other comments on the errata resolution, we have covered this. Is there any other particular topic you want to discuss for today? And I can move back to Miteko. If no, well, we are done for today at this interim, not really for this year. But we are going to resume regularly with the interim meetings on January 18. Same pattern, Wednesdays on odd weeks, and same time. I think we should have 5 interims before IETF 116. Anything else you want to raise today? Well, if no, it comes soon. When it comes, enjoy the Christmas season.
Enjoy the holidays, indeed.
Talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Rika, for the minutes.
No problem.
Bye-bye.
Bye.